I'm now joined by Charles Wright, the MD of Wolf Hollins, to give us an insider's perspective on the rebranding process. Thank you so much for joining us, Charles. We've heard so much about the whole rebranding of Hero Honda. Some of it hearsay, some speculation. What's the brief given to you by Hero Honda, and what's the biggest challenge you're facing in the process?
The chief challenge is that Hero Honda means something, Hero might mean something, and so does Honda. And Honda itself will be in the market. So the naming issue is quite a difficult one, and I imagine millions and tens of millions of Indians will have very strong views on the subject. And so this will be in the full glare of publicity, whatever is done, which is a big challenge. And then there's the relationship of whatever the company is called to its individual bikes. It's a fantastic job to do, and we're honoured to be working with Mr. Munjal on this.
There's also been speculation that the company may just decide to go with Hero. But a lot of experts say that going with just Hero may not be such a good idea, considering the name Hero in India is associated with Hero cycles.
We've heard the same thing, that the name Hero is used by lots of other businesses associated with the Hero group. So it may be that Hero on its own has some advantages and some disadvantages. We're at the moment still trying to weigh that question and go back to Mr. Munjal in the next couple of weeks with some suggestions. But what you're saying is absolutely right.
Is it then a possibility that Hero Honda will go in for a completely new name?
Well, nothing's ruled out, but I think one of the issues with naming anything is that there is never a clear and straightforward choice, because each alternative will have advantages and disadvantages. So, as you've said, just using the Hero name has some advantages and disadvantages. Were we to pick another name, then we lose the equity that Hero brings. So it's a question of balancing two very different things.
What's the phase-out plan looking like, and what's the deadline Mr. Pawan Munjal has given you?
We're working to a really tight time schedule and aim to be presenting our suggestions to him within a few weeks. What then happens in terms of what the Indian public sees is too early to say, because he'll have to think very hard about that based on our suggestions. But I imagine that you'll see something during the course of this year at the outside. Speculation
is also rife about Hero Honda looking at, focusing at their sub-brands, that is the bikes themselves, and let the mother brand take a back seat. Is that actually a possibility?
If you look at, for example, what Bajaj have done with the Pulsar is
right.
The Hero, sorry, no pun intended in that case, with Charisma, which is advertised heavily at the cricket, and I'm embarrassed to say as an English person, but I saw the ads for Hero Honda and Charisma during our glorious defeat just recently. And now, that's one way of doing it, but each different bike, the weight is different. I'm not sure what's the right answer yet, and it's a very delicate issue, because if I'm someone buying a motorcycle, am I buying a Hero Honda or am I buying a Model X? And the answer is a mixture of the two.
So if Hero Honda does go the Bajaj way, won't that mean that every sub-brand will have to be treated uniquely, and each of them would have to stand for a particular identity? Wouldn't that mean a lot more money and time, and do you see that as a feasible option?
Charisma already exists, and it has a presence in the marketplace. You're right in the sense that if you have multiple brands or names out in the marketplace, they all have to be explained, but that's happening already. Then the issue is, how are they sold? Because the dealerships are called Hero Honda. So it's not as straightforward as A or B. It's going to have to be a mixture of the two.
Sure.
And as you look at other bike manufacturers and other car manufacturers around the world, you see that different manufacturers have opted for different solutions from one company to the next. So there isn't a right answer to this.
Which automaker globally has been successful using this strategy where the mother brand, takes the back seat?
One example would be, if I take GM, people don't buy GM, General Motors, they buy Holden if they're in Australia, Chevrolet if they're in America, and so forth. So there's an example of strong brands which have nothing to do with the manufacturer. Equally, if I buy a BMW, I'm buying a BMW, whether it's a 3 Series, a 5 Series, or a K Series motorbike. In that case, the manufacturer brand is the vehicle brand. So each way of doing things has some pros and cons. There is no right answer, and I think the questions you're asking reflect a lot of the things we ourselves have been debating and exploring with the management.
Coming to Ashok Leyland and its transition to Hinduja Leyland, what's the mandate for rebranding this one?
What we're working on is the relationship between the manufacturer brand, Ashok Leyland, and the different verticals in which it operates, both in this country and then potentially in the future. And as they plan to expand, not just through partnerships with things like the link-ups they got with John Deere and Nissan, but to go abroad, there are a lot of naming and, as we would say, brand architecture issues which need to be thought through, and that's the thing we're doing with Ashok Leyland.
How much will it approximately cost a company like Ashok Leyland, for instance, for the entire rebranding process? Well,
if you change the name or even the logo of any company, the biggest cost typically is signage, because if you think of how many dealerships they got across this country and in the future abroad, each of those would need new signs, the offices will need new signs and so forth. Moreover, in their case, their vehicles carry the logo in several places stamped in metal. Therefore, one of the big costs will be retooling dies in factories. So the biggest costs of any rebranding are typically those that you wouldn't think of first.
You've also done some work with Tata Docomo. How was it to launch a telecom brand that entered so late and in a space that was already so cluttered?
We were, years ago, Wolf Olins worked on the Tata brand itself to reshape the T that you see up and down the country. And we were invited back beginning of 2008 to help them think about what kind of brand would they need for their new joint venture between Tata and Docomo of Japan. And the idea was, given that they were quite a late entrant to the market with their GSM license number 12 or 13, how on earth could they stand out amidst the clutter of mobile phone brands across the country? So the brand that we came up with, which is the one that was launched in Chennai, was deliberately unconventional and maverick in its spirit. And the idea was to capture a little of the spirit of the young Lord Krishna, playful, constantly changing, and it's worked. Tata Docomo is now, I think, number 6.
Thank you so much for joining us. Truly a pleasure to have you on Brand Equity, Charles.